Ready? If I can, it is 5:15. We'll go ahead and try to get started on time tonight. I know everybody's excited to finally see some beautiful weather. It was almost summerish out there at 90 degrees when we came in the door, so quite the contrast for the last 2 weeks. But we will go ahead and get started. This is the April 12th, 2018 meeting of the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Chris Jordan. I'm the chairman of this commission. I would like to remind everyone in the audience, as well as the folks up here this evening, if you would silence all of your electronic devices. Would also like to remind the commission members to turn their microphones and speak into them, as this is being recorded, and that way everybody can hear what we're talking about. I would also ask that anyone in the audience, when they come up to speak, to also speak into the microphone. We are going to go around the room and introduce ourselves. We are without a liaison to the council this evening, so we will start with Mr. Jack Deacon.
Jack Deacon. David Nunn.
Ann Stropman, city staff.
Dale Vaughn.
Bunny Tricky Cotton.
Chris Yarnell.
David Bangy.
Eric Barron.
Ian Zollinger.
Sonny Sanders.
Brian Wolford.
Alex Rottenberry.
Awesome, thank you. The procedural matters, the city code authorizes 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Alternates are designated to vote upon the absent or disqualification of a regular member. A quorum of 5 members or alternates is necessary to conduct business. We do have 5 regular members here this evening, luckily, as well as myself in case we need me to vote. I typically don't vote. In case we do, I will be there for that. The following members are absent this evening are Michael Lester, Dean Dutoy, and Bob George. All of our alternates are absent, which include Blake Marcus, Matthew Hall, and Michelle Mahoney. Is there any of the members here this evening that will be disqualifying themselves from any of the agenda items? Seeing none. The following members will be Bunny Tricky Cotton, Jack Deacon, David Nunn, Dale Vaughn, Chris Yarnell, and myself, Chris Jordan. Next, we'll have a call for cases. If someone would just raise their hand to represent they're here for this case, it is case number P18007, 3430 West Edgewood Drive. It is a preliminary PUD site plan. Thank you. We do have someone here for that. City staff, have we received any requests for continuances?
No.
Okay. Is there any reason to reorder the agenda?
No.
Okay. If you would, please give us the format and order of testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to briefly describe the procedures of the commission. The proceedings of the meeting are being recorded, so please step to the microphone when you are asked to speak and give your name and address for the record. The standard order for each case is as follows. After introduction of the request by city staff, the applicant or their consultants will provide information on the request. The opening presentation by the applicant shall be limited to 10 minutes unless additional time is granted by the commission. The applicant shall have 3 additional minutes for closing testimony if requested. We will then ask to hear from supporters of the request. We will then ask to hear from opponents of the request, and we will then ask to hear for anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. Testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes each unless additional time is granted by the commission. City staff will then make their recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, reference to printed material, including staff reports and applicable findings, shall not be read into the record unless directed by the commission. The commission will then close the testimony from the floor. The commission will then discuss the proposal, then publicly make its determination with reasons. The form of the motion shall be positive, that is, the motion shall be made to accept the request as presented or with modifications, stipulations, or conditions. A final vote will be taken with ayes in favor, nays opposed. The chairman shall announce the results of the vote, specifying the number of votes cast in favor and the number of votes cast against. The following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting: the City Code of the City of Jefferson as amended, the Comprehensive Plan and Land Use Map. Copies of the application are under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, the affidavit of publication of the public notice in the newspaper, copies of drawings, plans, and or renderings under consideration, letters or memoranda from staff reports, minutes of proceedings, correspondence or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, rules of procedure for the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. These items are public record and available for inspection in the Department of the Planning and Protective Services or through the Office of the City Clerk. Please be advised that any items that are presented, distributed, or otherwise received pertaining to the cases under consideration become property of the Commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, petitions, and letters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I appreciate that. I stand corrected. We do have a council liaison here this evening. If you'd like to introduce yourself, that would be wonderful.
Erin Wiseman, 3rd Ward City Council.
Thanks for sitting in with us tonight. Next, we will move on to the adoption of the agenda. As city staff said, there is no need to reorder, so I will entertain a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Next, we would have the approval of the minutes for the regular special, just the regular meeting? Oh, we're going to do them separately. I see that. Sorry. First, we will do the approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of the March 8th meeting for 2018. Ann has provided those for us tonight. When you all are through looking through those, we will entertain a motion.
Move to approve March 8th minutes.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Next, we will have approval of the minutes of the special meeting of March 29th, 2018. Entertain a motion when you're ready.
Move to approve March 29th minutes.
Second.
Motion is second. Is there any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Staff has informed us that we do have some communication on tonight's agenda item. It is, I'm getting there. Where'd you bury that? Very end, of course. From Mr. Frank Jung, J-U-N-G. Young, is that how you say it? Okay, Frank Young. That has been distributed to the planning staff, and they have distributed that to us tonight. I do believe city staff says he is in favor of the plan.
That is correct.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Next, we will move on to the new business. In public hearing, we have case number P18007, 3430 West Edgewood Drive. It is a preliminary PUD plan. Ian, if you can tell us a little bit about it, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to direct your attention here to the property where the PUD is located. The nearest major intersection is Edgewood and Wildwood, and the property is located here. The zoning of the property is currently PUD, and so what is being presented tonight is just the preliminary PUD plan. The property is actually what is shown here is part of a larger parcel, but part of this with the application they submitted parcel division, so they're dividing this piece off of the piece as a whole, and so the PUD will be, the preliminary PUD plan will be on this portion here. Here's a site plan of the PUD. They are building a clinic. The PUD plan indicates that the permitted uses shall be limited to a medical, dental, clinic, or office building. They have sufficient parking. Signage is shown here. They'll have a sign, monument type sign. The details of that sign have not been finalized, but staff recommends that they adhere to the signage allowances of the C1 zoning district. Landscaping and parking lot lighting have not been finalized as well, but staff recommends they adhere to the allowances of a C1 zoning district as well. The building and the consultant will be able to answer more about the building style, but the PUD plan indicates that they will have an exterior finish with brick. The eave height will be 9 feet with a hip roof with architectural shingles. There is a potential future addition to the building here, and we had them put that on the plan so they would not have to come back for approval on that. Traffic, the proposal does not exceed the 100 peak hour vehicle trips, and does not trigger a requirement for site-specific traffic study. And here is just a closer view of the parking lot and building. And the applicant and their consultant are here, and they can answer any more questions that you may have about the application.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think at this point we'll ask the engineering division if they have any comments, and we'll kind of let city staff kind of lay out everything they have. I was going to say, Shane, do you have anything for us tonight? But I don't know who I'd be insulting there. So.
There was a staff report, engineering staff report, that was in the packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I don't have anything particular to say about it, but if you had questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right. Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for city staff at this point? All right, seeing none, we'll ask if there is anyone in the audience who'd like to come forward and present this case. If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
No. You gotta press the bottom of it there, hold it there.
Test, test. There we go. Once again, I'm Brian McMillan with Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. Here on behalf of the owner and the Chamber of Commerce, which is technically the current owner of the property that will be selling it to SI Properties, and Oni Irvine is here on behalf of the future owner of the property that will be developing it. And then Randy Allen is also here this evening as the current owner of the property. So I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions if they could, if you had any. So just a quick history of the property. Ever since Edgewood's been out there, we've all seen that. It's one of the flattest sites in town out along there. That area was used. Material was taken from it to grade Edgewood Drive in and kind of raise it up above the floodplain. And at one time, we actually had a grocery store going on this site with a big Kohl's development that was going to go out there, but that didn't happen. And then we've looked at some other smaller, lower impact office complexes. But so I think this will be a really good fit for this area. The building, if you look, I've given you all some handouts, and I've taken some pictures that they've actually of some other facilities they've built with this pretty much exact same floor plan. So that'll give you a really good idea of what it's going to look like and what the signage will probably look like and whatnot. So as far as that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has anything. I do have a couple of handouts, just the overall kind of aerial photo with the site and kind of some of the neighboring properties outlined, and then a copy of the site plan, and then of course this visual with what the building will look like. So, yes.
And this may be a city question too, but I see that the sidewalk goes down, what is that, Wildwood? And there's no sidewalk in front of it. Is that not required?
There is one shown on there. A sidewalk is required along Edgewood, and
okay, is
we
it the
do.
screen part right here?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, perfect.
Any other questions for Mr. McMillan at this point from the commissioners? Brian, stay there for just a second if you would. I think city staff has a comment.
Brian, can you comment or add anything on the location of the driveway and the neighboring property across Wildwood?
Sure.
And the thought process that went into that?
If you've driven out there during busy times, there's a lot of state workers up on Missouri Boulevard, and a lot of them come down this way to avoid the Missouri Boulevard 179 intersection, I think. And they come down and turn left to go up to 179. So that intersection really backs up during the peak hour, especially in the evening. And so we tried to move that entrance off of Wildwood back as far as we thought would be reasonable without getting it too far. At some point we're going to get way up the hill and we'll be having to come down a hill. But this location is kind of comparable with, if you see some dashed in lines across the street, that's Central Bank owns that property, and that's kind of a preliminary site plan that we've done for them, where they anticipate possibly putting entrances in the future. So basically that's kind of, we've tried to split the difference of not getting too far back, but back far enough to get behind the traffic that backs up at the intersection there. And then, of course, there's an existing entrance off Edgewood Drive, and that entrance is limited by a median, so it's a right-in, right-out regardless. So, any other questions?
Brian, where's the current VA facilities at in the Jefferson City area? Is there?
It's actually on Edgewood Drive also. It's right below the car wash and yeah.
Strip center there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that's where they were at. Anyway, it's just memory. Okay. Irrelevant to this, just point of interest. Any other questions for Mr. McMillan at this point from the commissioners? Thank you, sir.
All right.
Do any of the other representatives of current owner or future owners wish to speak?
He did a great job.
Okay. We'll leave it with that. Okay. Thank you. We will move on and ask if there is anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this request. If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this request? If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Lastly, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this request? Seeing none. At this time, I will close testimony. Ian, I will let you get to your staff report.
Staff recommends approval of the proposed preliminary PUD plan. The property is located along an arterial street, which makes an ideal location for the proposed use. Similar uses currently exist along Edgewood, and the preliminary PUD plan meets the standards that are required for the proposed use. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any questions regarding the staff report at this point?
This is more just general information. Is there any plan here in the future, or would it take development of the adjoining track to the west for putting that median in at Harper's Ferry? So Harper's Ferry is going to be right in, right out?
As it currently stands, the road sort of narrows as it gets to Harper's Ferry, and so up to that point it had been built. I think that center median is 11 feet wide, I think, and as it gets to Harper's Ferry it narrows. Certainly it would depend on what would be proposed there, and if it was something that was of a high enough use, that we might have to look at doing something additional there, but just for the moment, I don't think that there's any particular plan.
Is there anything on the staff report from the engineering division that we need to go over?
I don't really think so. As far as access to the site, I think Ian had talked about that. Utilities are present, fire hydrants are there. We did have a comment concerning access from transit, but I think we're hoping to work with the consultant on that as we move forward. But it's actually off the site, and so probably is not particularly pertinent to the actual discussion of the PUD plan. But it's something that we would like to consider further.
Okay, thank you. Ian, I think you mentioned this early on, but this is a preliminary plan. If approved tonight, will the final plan come back to the commission, or will that be approved administratively?
That'll be approved administratively.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions for city staff? If not, we will entertain a motion. I do believe that we have been provided with a revised motion that's in your packet tonight. So if whoever was going to make that motion, please use that as a template.
I'd like to make a motion for approval of the preliminary PUD plan with the establishment of a permitted use limited to medical, dental, clinic, or office building and establishment of an underlying zoning of C1 neighborhood commercial for the use purposes of determining signage and lighting, subject to technical corrections of the planning and engineering divisions.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? So the motion passes 5 in favor and 0 against. Will this be forwarded to the city council?
Yes,
What
it'll
will those
be
dates and times and location be, please?
May 21st. That's a Monday at 6 p.m. here in these chambers.
May 21st, 6 p.m. in these chambers, and it will be a public hearing again if someone would like to come and speak on that. Or
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
All right. Very good. Thank you guys for coming this evening. We will move on to other business. I believe we have the Southside Old Munichburg Neighborhood Plan, the staff-initiated rezoning proposal presentation. Eric, you're going to do that this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Of course, the Southside Neighborhood Plan is something that's come in front of you a number of times. It was formally brought for your adoption, and the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted it in July of last year. And so that's the cover page out of that plan. And the plan had a lot of different steps within, a lot of different ideas on how to improve that neighborhood. I believe there was 10 different components within it, and 4 different kind of long-range components within it, so 14 different things. But one thing that it also included was some land use recommendations, and one of the early implementation steps of the plan is actually to pursue those land use changes, the zoning changes that would affect that land use. Also establish some overlay districts. And so I think you've seen this map or a similar version of it, and I'll probably point over here at this screen. How to do that one? There's more people over here. So we have 5 different areas that we've kind of targeted for some sort of zoning action. They're each kind of different. They're not necessarily in any order. The number 1 is an area that's primarily residential, but zoned multifamily. Number 2 is very similar, primarily single-family residential, but zoned multifamily. Number 3 is an area just beside Lincoln University that was targeted for basically some commercial. Number 4 is the Dunklin Street kind of commercial core. It's really targeted for an overlay district and zoning to be very similar to a downtown style of development. And then number 5 is a little mixed-use district along Broadway. our current focus, so this, to pursue this plan, we've broken it up into pieces, and our current focus is number one. That's the one that we plan to bring forward to the public and to you first. So we've been working toward that, and so within the Southside plan, there's land use recommendations, and so this is one map that's contained within that plan, recommending the future land use for the areas. Basically the same thing that we present to you when we say the development plan map of the comprehensive plan. Well, this is basically the development plan map for the Southside area that is part of the comprehensive plan now that the Southside plan is adopted. And so that area one show up here, and so it's outlined with blue right here. And so the recommendation of that plan was to rezone, or to establish a single-family character along that area. It's largely single-family right now, but there are a variety of houses that have been converted to multiple uses and such. The reason for that is it's zoned an RA2, a multifamily residential zoning district right there. So basically the initial thought was to rezone that area to a single family district, an RS4 or something along those lines. And so in pursuit to that, we started mapping out some of the land use in order to prepare the case and the presentation in front of the public and you. And so this is the land use map that we created. There's a lot going on this thing. It's kind of a working map. But to point out some of the different colors here, the green colors are the existing single-family uses within the area. The red ones are things that have been converted to multiple units. Okay, and then we started looking at some of the area just outside of this, and see that much of it is single-family in character as well, though there are kind of a higher number of buildings that are either apartment buildings or multiple units, be it duplexes or triplexes, things like that. Buildings that were built for multiple units rather than houses that were converted for that purpose. And so in looking at that, we got to thinking that that maybe if we follow the land use pattern exactly as it is, or the land use plan exactly as it is within the Southside plan, we may be missing an opportunity to include some of these areas up in here that are also single family in character, and establish them as a single family area as well, rather than the multifamily type of pattern that the land use plan recommends. And so basically what I'm throwing out in front of you, and we're looking for some comment possibly, or what you all think about this, is to include a wider area within this first rezoning proposal that we plan to bring forward to you. And so instead of just including the single family area, to look at this area as well and put together a plan on it as well. Looking at some of the streetscapes in that area, and I encourage you, if you're not entirely familiar with it, to drive through it, but especially Broadway Street, with the plan showing a multifamily, and basically what that means is a redevelopment of that area to apartments at some time in the future, which is kind of contrary to the trend. I think the public desire just really more focused on preservation of existing residential areas, especially the really neat ones, and not so much redevelopment. And so we're thinking that maybe we need a modified zoning plan for some of that area that recognizes that there are a number of apartments and multifamily uses in it, but also that there are some streetscapes that are predominantly single-family residential and may need to stay that way. So our revised plan is to modify the boundaries and to look at a wider area there, to put together a zoning plan not only for this area that the plan calls out for single family, but also this area up here. It would probably be a somewhat spotty zoning plan. Again, separating out the apartments, keeping them zoned multifamily, but looking at certain streets and maybe coming up with some single family zoning recommendations there. To put that plan together, to present it to the public, that's the most important thing, see what they think, and then bring it forward through the formal process. That's what we were looking at. We came up with the boundary. Basically, it would follow the same line as the existing RA2 and commercial boundary in the area. So include all of the RA2 area except for a solid area of apartments down here. We'd put together a zoning plan. We'd probably bring it back to you all just for a look, not for any kind of formal recommendation. Before bringing it to the public, we typically have a public meeting to describe what our plan and recommendations are, and to answer questions, get some feedback, and then depending on that feedback, bring it back to you for formal action. That is our thoughts, and we're looking for any feedback you may have.
Zoning, that whole area in there, you'll have 4 or 5 single family, and all of a sudden, same time period, you'll have a duplex or even a fourplex. There's usually spot zoning and then longer.
So I used the term spot zoning because it's a very easy thing to convey. It's usually used in a negative connotation. I don't believe that in this case it would be as negative as it is usually used. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, possibly, but yeah. Yeah. And that is really the primary thing that I think the desire is to prevent happening in the future, and to encourage those conversions to revert back to a single family. Yeah, again, I use the term spot zoning, but I think it's important to recognize that the Southside Plan has a recommendation of having a variety of different types of housing. They usually mean different income levels, but having a mix of housing types is really the way you accomplish that within this area. And there already is a mix. It's just kind of acknowledging that and putting the zoning pattern in place to basically protect it as it is. So,
if somebody, there would obviously be grandfathered in, anything that was multifamily would be grandfathered in, but once it changed ownership with that, and it was zoned, the zoning was modified to change it to single family, right? It would take away their ability to do a multifamily, like a duplex or something like that.
And so the way grandfathering or non-conforming works is the single family and 2-unit residential buildings are protected. If they were to burn, be destroyed by tornado or something, they could be rebuilt as a 2-unit building. One or single family could be rebuilt, or a 2-unit could be rebuilt, as long as they don't increase the size or the footprint of the building. So those two are protected, and that's important in order to allow for refinancing of those buildings. Anything that's a 3-plex or above, or anything commercial, if it's burns to 75% or more of its value, then the only way to restore the use of the property is in conformance with the zoning code, meaning they cannot restore it. I mean, the general thought is to try to establish a zoning pattern there that would not result in a large number of non-conforming uses, with the exception of 2-unit conversions and possibly duplexes that were built in the area, which does not matter because they are protected if they burn. What a property owner could not do is voluntarily demolish them and rebuild them as a 2-unit, or convert them back to a single unit and then later want to convert them back to 2 units or anything like that. It would lose its grandfathering. So.
But his transfer of title, as part of his question, was the transfer of title from owner A to owner B, and they are a non-conforming, does not nullify that non-conforming. Transfer of title does not do that.
Correct. The zoning would not affect a transfer of title. It doesn't. You don't lose any kind of land use rights because of the use of the zoning through the transfer of title. Really the main way that the zoning affects that is if it's non-conforming, and so if it's a triplex or above on single-family zoning, is it can be difficult to get financing for that. Banks tend to be shy about loaning money on non-conforming property.
If they were wanting to convert it back to a single-family property and then convert it back, they wouldn't be able to convert it back again to a triplex, basically. Because that's where
Yeah.
it kind of puts a
Basically,
Okay.
yep.
So Eric, kind of fitting in with all this, then would the city try to do kind of like what Jack alluded to, and that is work the zoning around so that those properties that maybe would even be a 3 or a 4-plex that were actually built that way from the beginning would still get the correct zoning so that they wouldn't be illegally non-conforming use, but those properties that were converted, which we're kind of trying to eliminate because they have caused a lot of problems, those would be zoned single family potentially so that they couldn't continue that use later on.
In principle, yes.
Just to satisfy, did we not do this in part of the Old Town area? With the zoning, it was back over on what we call Greenwich District, over by that old pool.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't recall.
We stopped, I'm almost certain we stopped whatever conversions there were, had to stop there. You could no longer do it. And then if they sold it, you had to go back. Or maybe
No, I know nothing of that. I think
that was a dream then.
we do not see that many conversions these days as we used to in the past. I think for a variety of reasons. One of them is the parking requirements got strengthened at some point, and to do the conversion you would have to construct a parking lot usually, and usually the properties are either too small or it does not make economic sense to do that. But it is today still a legal thing to do, to convert a building in this area to multiple units if you can meet all of the other requirements, which parking's at the top of the list. So
I think code enforcement in general over the last 10, 20 years, whatever it's been, has also stepped up for people converting stuff, and maybe doing it nights, weekends, evenings, or getting somebody to do it and saying, don't pull a permit. And I think a lot of the contractors have said, we're not going to do it, let alone your staff has been there when people are doing it, said, stop, you can't do that. So I think that's helped.
I think you are correct.
I was a little bit surprised, Jack, that you weren't concerned more about the lines.
If I had a map in front of me, there's a couple questions as to why. I didn't have a map.
We'll wait for your rebuttal on that next time. No, we appreciate you paying attention. I know the concern for you is these older areas and things like that. Eric, anything else for us?
Honestly, there are a lot of areas in this city that are similarly situated. Predominantly single-family neighborhoods that are zoned for multifamily. That zoning pattern, I think, has been in place since about the 70s, and is, I believe, to be flawed. We have a number of large rezonings that I believe need to be undertaken that are supported by various planning documents. And it takes a lot of staff work in order to do something like this, a lot of interaction with the public. This is, over 100 property owners that we would be notifying of this thing. And so, one, it's a pretty big project. Two, I'd like to encourage the public and the body to exercise some patience as we go through it. And three, because we have so many, we hope to move forward with it at the earliest possible convenience. So.
You will be notifying all the property owners within these districts, obviously, about the changes that potentially could affect them. And obviously, they'd be welcome to come talk to you about what their land use is and all that, as well as I'm assuming at some point you'll have some kind of neighborhood meeting and lay this out in front of them and stuff like that.
Yes. We're not ready to present anything to them right now. We really wouldn't be able to answer any detailed questions. But once we get a plan together, our current plan is to invite all of them to a neighborhood meeting to discuss the plan and answer questions, and then after gauging that reaction, potentially notify it up for a formal process. So,
thank you. Are there any other questions for Eric or city staff regarding this? Eric, anything else you have on this?
No, the next thing on the agenda, I think, was staff updates on prior cases. We actually didn't have any go in front of the City Council last month. We have 2 pending for public, or one for a public hearing tomorrow, and one is a subdivision plat, or sorry, Monday. One is a subdivision plat. So we'll report on that next month.
Awesome.
So
the only other thing that I would have under other business is, I know you mentioned tonight that we have 2 commission members who will be terming out, I believe it was next month.
that is correct.
So we will be losing 2 experienced members. I think they've been with us 3 terms or so. I think, Eric, you are encouraging, if anyone knows someone that would like to serve the citizens of Jefferson City, that we are always looking for good people to volunteer. I'm assuming that all the volunteers would need to fill out a form, and that goes to the city clerk.
It goes to the Human Resources Department, I believe. And so there are forms. Certainly encourage anyone in the community interested in any facet of local government to look at the spread of boards and see where their interests lie. And if they're interested in serving their community, that is an opportunity. For my division specifically, we manage 2 boards: the Board of Adjustment, who's responsible for variances and issuing conditional use permits, also is the appeal body for many of our administrative processes. And so a very technical kind of position. We currently have a vacancy on that, and if anyone's interested in the community to fill out a volunteer form for that. Then on the Planning and Zoning Commission, appointments typically take place, I think, in May. So if anyone's interested in that, I'd encourage them to fill out a form immediately, and so that can be forwarded on to through that process. It goes in front of the administration subcommittee of the City Council, and then on to the council for formal action. Is how people are appointed.
I'm assuming
to that.
Those applications probably are online and everything.
I believe they're online, and then also here at City Hall for people to complete.
Well, this commission will be proud because we've had a few people that have started with us, and they've ended up on City Council. I think the count might be 2 or 3 of you now that were with us for a while, and then, current council members might be up to 2 or 3 that were. Rick Mahowich, yeah. So we would encourage anybody within this. You have to be within the city limits of Jefferson City.
For both boards, yes, you do have to be a resident of the city limits. And I did check, Mr. Chair, with the law department. Because of the statutory nature of the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Adjustment, members are not allowed to serve on both. But other than that, I know of no conflicts of someone serving on 2 boards. I don't know exactly how they process that, though.
Fair enough. All right, thank you, Eric. Is there anything from the commission members? If not, we will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight.